pushing record now, and hopefully it's doing it. Since this is the first time I've actually recorded, we don't know if it's going to work. So let's go and get started. Again, my name is Ryan. Thank you so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it. I wanted to go ahead and get started by the way that most HDC events, oh, that didn't work. The way that most HDC things get going, but also to recognize and acknowledge that it's incredibly important that we all know and understand that regardless of where we are, as long as we're in like the Pacific Northwest-ish area, across Washington and much of the surrounding area, we are on the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish peoples. They're the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. It's important to note that we cannot work to fulfill our mission and our vision of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and cost of colonization. So we'll give that a second just to let everybody, let that sink in. And I want to also go over briefly what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, if you have any questions or thoughts or concerns, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're happy to answer questions there. We're also happy to answer questions throughout the presentation. So if you have a question and you'd like to verbalize it as opposed to typing it in, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. You know, regardless of where we are in the presentation, as well as at the very end, we also have a spot for questions, but don't feel that you need to wait that long for it. So just to kind of get started, I want to make sure you all know what it is we're going to talk about. So first off, we're going to talk a bit about what habitat is. I like to say that we're not your grandfather's habitat anymore. And the reality is we've done a lot of changing, not only since our creation back in 1976, but also since in the last 10 years. And we want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do now. We're going to talk about what this problem was that we kind of came across that we needed to solve, particularly around COVID and things like that. But that's not the only problem. That's a bit of a teaser. We'll talk about how we ended up solving the problem, what we ended up learning as a result of the problem, or as a result of the work that we've done, and then what outstanding questions do we still have? Because there are still things we don't know. And it's important that we recognize that and acknowledge that moving forward. So for those of you who don't know the history of habitat, very briefly, in 1942, an organization called Koanoa Farm was founded on the principles of pacifism. You can tell I'm just slurring, getting my words all mixed up today. Pacifism, racial integration in Americus, Georgia. Now, again, this is 1942. That was a pretty revolutionary concept at that time. Unfortunately, it still kind of is somewhat. But members pooled their resources into a common treasury, treated everybody as equals, regarded race, class, didn't matter. Everybody was an equal. And they worked together as a community to lift everybody up. In 1969, Koanoa Farm started this low-cost, interest-free building program that was part of their housing ministry that they ended up doing that eventually ended up constructing 200 homes. Millard and Linda Fuller, the founders of Habitat, saw that, were members of Koanoa, and decided to kind of branch that part of it out, that housing ministry out, into Habitat for Humanity International, as we now know it, back in 1976. It quickly grew. We ended up having, into 1986, where 10 years later, where the first Habitat affiliate came to the Seattle King County area. During the intervening years, we ended up having about 3 different affiliates across the whole space, and we ended up serving the Seattle King County region. In 2012, though, all of those different affiliates ended up being fully merged, into one, into the affiliate that we know today as Habitat for Humanity, Seattle King County. And then most recently, something we're actually quite excited about, was in July of this year, we actually merged with Kittitas County Habitat for Humanity to grow our service area. So not only are we serving Seattle, King County area, but we also serve Kittitas as well. So I keep pushing the button and it's not working. So it's important to note that Habitat is a organization where our vision is a world where everybody has a decent, safe, and affordable place to live. Now that's a big mission, right? That's a really big vision. And there's a lot of different organizations that are working within that space to fit into the different parts that kind of fit their best model. For Habitat, we find ourselves on that housing continuum in that affordable home ownership market. There's a ton of work and incredibly important work being done in the emergency shelter and transitional housing spaces, as well as the non-market rental spaces, trying to help bring people to a position where they're able to continue along and able to get started, get up on their feet, and continue staying in a place that's safe. However, what we've found, and kind of the area that we serve, is that bottleneck between where somebody's able to afford a market rate apartment, but not able to afford the $800,000+ market ownership space. Habitat comes into that middle ground and helps bridge the gap, which is something that we're really proud of that we do. The way that we tackle this is through something we call permanently affordable home ownership. Ultimately, one Habitat home will serve multiple families over time, right? It's a one-time subsidy that lasts 99, really closer to 200 years, that home will end up serving families. And 99% of all of our families successfully complete our program, whether it is paying off their loan entirely or buying a new home or something along those lines, a new, I should say, market rate home. But they also, the vast majority of folks successfully complete the program we have. And it's something we're very, very proud of. Now, what we're looking to do over the next 5 years is really big for us. Previously, before this, for the last 10, 20 years, 20, 30 years or so, we built or repaired roughly 600 homes across the King County and Seattle area. And we're proud of that. We've done a lot of great work. But what we're looking to do over the next 5 years is really radically bump that number up by a lot. In the next 5 years, we're anticipating building and selling about 185 new homes across 10 communities in Seattle, King County, right? We're going to be doing repair work on helping preserve over 250 community homes in King County and Kittitas County. It's a big lift, and it's a big change from what we had been doing before. And I want to take a moment as we continue going on to kind of touch on what is it that we did before. And for that, I'm going to hand it off to Maya.
You know, Ryan alluded to this, but historically, Habitat in Seattle, King County, we were doing probably 10 homes a year if we were lucky and worked very hard. So we would build and sell 10 homes per year. We had 3 to 5 meetings, information meetings for applicants in the communities. And when we did process the home buyers, we would do it one development or one project at a time. So for example, if we had a development in Renton, we'd select all of those home buyers before we moved on to South Park per se. So with the goal of 185 homes in 5 years, getting to 1,000 families served, 1,000 families built, it's a paradigm switch for the way that we do business. In 2019, my team and I started figuring out how we were going to ramp up. So we increased our community outreach, increased the number of meetings we were holding in the different towns, just basically doubled what we were doing. So starting that in the fall of 2019, when 2020 rolls in, we were doing relatively well, gearing up. I was confident we'd be able to find the home buyers and homeowners for repair, and then COVID hit. So, you know, I ask people, and I think that as we get older and get further away from this will be like the question we ask each other: where were you when people landed on the moon? Or maybe that dates me. That could probably date me drastically. Anyway, I think I was in my office in COVID when the decision was made to lock down King County. So now we're faced with this whole gearing up, this whole ramping up of everything we do to find buyers out in the community. We've increased our presence in the community. We've increased the number of contacts we have with applicants. And suddenly that's no longer possible. So what is it that we can do? The changes that we made, I don't want to oversell them. I'm sure many people have done likewise. And what we did is we just turned to technological stuff. And we finally, I guess I got to say, I finally overcame my tech barrier, and we moved our connections with our clients to an online presence. So the application process and the display of homes, everything to do with that is online. Our classes moved online. Communication, orientations, and conversations with applicants moved online. And construction types, we changed that also. Ryan knows the details on this, so flipping back to Ryan.
Yeah, and it's important to note that we're not 100% there yet, but as we're getting closer and closer, we're getting to a point, at least the goal is, where it is possible for a homeowner to go, or for a Habitat family to go from introduction into the program through the entire program, all the way to closing on a house, where they don't actually have to interact in person with the staff if they don't want to, whether it's safety or whatever the case may be. And that, at least to us, is really quite revolutionary. Ideally, we'd like to interact with people, but we don't always get the chance, particularly in a situation where that's not really safe to do. But in order for us to be able to do all these new homes that we're looking at building and selling, the reality is we can't just keep doing these, single family home on a lot type projects that, used to be done and people think of as Habitat, right? The reality is those aren't done anymore. And we also, among them, haven't been doing it. We're actually exploring a lot of different new construction types, and we'll get into that. And we've also changed the way that we do our volunteer work. Habitat's known for sweat equity, right? That's what we do, and that's what we're all about. But the reality is, as we face these new challenges, we need to make the changes, and we need to change with the times. And we've been able to do that both in our volunteer model and our construction types as well. So back to the homeownership part, or the
Thank you, Ryan. The first step that we did was we separated the applicant and the home ownership website from the main website of Seattle King County. The main website deals mainly with volunteerism and donors, and I felt as if home ownership and repair was getting lost in the pages of our main site. So we created a site called buyhabitat.org, in which we go through every step online. This slide is a snapshot of the homepage, and we used it because it gives you an idea of, when we say every step is online, what we did. If you notice the do you qualify, how to apply, next steps, and below that are boxes which are actual links to the other process, but it goes through all of the details. So our thought is that now our applicants can do what we usually did with them in meetings, whether in the community or here in the office. They can do it at their own time, and they no longer have to fight the traffic to get to a meeting at the local library. They don't need to worry about childcare. This website is also translated by Google Services, which actually works pretty well. So we have, I think it's 23 to 25, maybe more different languages that people are using, that we notice people are using. So if it's an ESL applicant, they can work through the information on their own time to make sure they understand it. And, we're available via email to answer any questions or phone, but the website gives them the basics. It also, it also has changed I want to say the appearance or the information that we offer is different. When we hired the contractor, what I said is I want a Habitat Zillow site. So we got as close as we could. This is the shot of our resale properties. So we're using photographs to help people see the home instead of having to go and visit the home if it's built. For new construction, we're posting those developments along with site development plans, floor plans, the basic details. Not as extensive as Zillow or Redfin, but the basic home information is there, as well as the cost or the revenue, the sales price of the home, and what the expectations are of the buyer. So they can make a lot of their decisions just by working on our website and communicating with us via email and via telephone. We also list things like the lenders we're working with, and this is just a note that it's for both of our programs, applicants for home ownership and applicants for repair. We've also moved our educational classes to a electronic Zoom presence. So we currently hold our financial classes and our Share Your Story public speaking class in a Zoom presence. We're in the process of designing the home maintenance and developing a Habitat DIY program to teach people how to do repairs and maintenance on their home, fixing a toilet, unclogging the sink, as far as even like repairing drywall. These classes are required from all of the home buyers and the repair homeowners, the extent of which the number of classes depends on which program that they are applying to. For homeowners, it's from 10 to 12 classes. The repair families, it focuses mostly around finances. So with the classes that we put on, we also moved all of our conversations to an online Zoom process. A homebuyer orientation, after a person or a client is accepted into the program, we have about an hour-long meeting to let them know the expectations of what's going to happen, what they're going to be doing before they buy their home. And then also during the orientation, we talk about their resales restrictions, the use restrictions on the home. And then we use a different software program to get signatures. We're using Adobe right now. I think we did some attempts with DocuSign, but Adobe works pretty well. Getting signatures electronically has probably been the most challenging for our home buyers, but we're getting the hang of it. So,
Maya, so there's a question in the chat, which I'm actually surprised I could see the chat.
Thank you.
But are there, John Winters asks, are the classes available to anyone online or only Habitat clients?
They are available to anyone online. So, and as we continue to develop the classes, we're going to spend some money and make professionally done video classes. So as we improve that segment of our business, we will be sharing them with everybody.
Awesome.
Okay, next slide. Oh, the Homeowner Portal. Speaking of classes. So the Homeowner Portal is phase 2 of buyhabitat.org. Having a central area where our homeowners, after they buy the home, they can go and get any forms they might need, warranty request forms. We do an annual certification to ensure that our home buyers are living in their homes. We have a primary residency requirement on all of Habitat homes. So every year we ask them if they're still living in their homes, they sign off on it. And then if it's a little bit cagey, we will do more research beyond that. So by putting the forms online, they can access them there. Maintenance calendars. This will also be the place where we store those modules for our homeowners and for the general public. We'll have a website that is only accessed by Habitat homeowners, but on the portal, there will be information for everyone. And then the resale procedures. It's just when a Habitat home buyer gets to the point where they want to sell their home, most of the time they're buying a home on the private market. We can list the procedures and get them started via the portal. Okay.
So in order to be able to accomplish all this, right? I mean, we were doing all this work. We were already looking at building up. And once COVID hit, we made all of these changes, right? We pushed the development of this website. We looked at moving everything in are actively moving everything online. Most things already are, a few things that we're still just trying to trickle onto. And we're really pushing this effort to make everything online. But the reality is, as we all know, not everything can be online. And particularly if you're looking at an aggressive growth path like Habitat is, we have been doing some degree of planning ahead of time. But again, we can't do that single family home type model anymore. That's why we're actually exploring a lot of different new construction types. Something that most people haven't thought of with Habitat is we're actually in the process of, like up there in the upper left corner is a picture of what we're hoping the Capitol Hill project that we're working on will look like. That's going to be a 13-unit condo building that we're in the process of building. We're also looking at doing row houses like that picture down at the bottom, and duplexes, triplexes, condo conversions as well. We're really exploring all kinds of different opportunities and methods to make sure that we are successfully maximizing the amount of space and the amount of time that we have, because the reality is land is just too darn expensive for us to be able to just continue doing things the way they had always been 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? We understand the importance of density, and it's only growing more and more important, particularly as prices continue to rise, people continue to get pushed out of their own communities. So we need to make sure that we're approaching this in a way that allows for us to be able to maximize that as much as possible. In addition to that, we're also, I keep pushing the button and it doesn't, keep pushing the arrow button and I need to click instead of push. In addition to all of that, we're also seeing a lot of changes to our volunteer models, right? We were very lucky in that as a affordable homeownership provider, we were able to continue building through the pandemic. Although, like everybody else, we had to stop bringing on volunteers onto our worksite. Because of that, we were able to do that and have that driven primarily by staff and AmeriCorps members. We also brought in some subcontractors to help out with some of the work as well. And we were lucky that we had the financial flexibility to be able to accomplish that. But the reality is we're continuing to try and find new ways to better use the staff and labor that we have. We don't have that, when you envision Habitat sometimes, and one of my favorite pictures that you ever see is when you see that group of 10, 15 people all lined up against the side of a building, and they're like half lifting up that wall of that home, right? That's always a great visual. And it's something that I always enjoy seeing the picture of. The reality, though, is nowadays that's not really an option so much anymore, because you can't have those large group of volunteers on the work site. We've been lucky that as King County has continued to go through these phases, that we've been able to make those changes necessary in order to be successful. And we do COVID safe training now for all of our volunteers. We have a limited number of volunteers on site at any one time. Obviously, as the pandemic starts to taper off, I think would be the appropriate term, at least hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll, hopefully be able to bring more and more volunteers back onto our work sites. We're certainly excited about that opportunity, but we also know that safety is the most important thing. whether it's construction site safety as far as building or COVID safety as far as people being healthy. So we have been able to start bringing some volunteers in, but again, most of this stuff is being driven by staff and AmeriCorps members now. So a lot of the things that we've gone through and a lot of lessons that we've learned so far have been, well, why don't I actually hand it off to Maya to talk about some of these different lessons that we've learned instead of me just babbling on.
Thanks, Ryan. I think of the COVID lockdown announcement now as like the event which broke our box. It has caused us, and we found ourselves in a situation where we had to think outside of the box to make things happen. So once we decided to move forward with the aggressive schedule for building and selling homes, it was just a matter of being creative, thinking all things are possible, and then implementing step by step those things to finish them out. So I think we've done a great job at turning a negative into a positive. And as it turns out, the changes that we made in reaction to COVID are things that we are now institutionalizing into the way that we do things. The reasons why are because of the lessons learned, our home buyers and responses that we're getting from them, and just in watching what's happening, it's easier for them. The idea that they can do things on their own time, whether it be submitting documents, the application, or learning about the criteria and the requirements of the program, is a great advantage. The idea that they don't have to leave their home to get to an information meeting at a local library on an evening or Saturday morning is great for them. The idea that we can do ESL applicants on their schedule, on their time, is also a positive. So because of the fact that it's easier for our applicants, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And it also allows us to process more applicants faster. So we're no longer doing one project at a time. We can do 2 to 3 projects or developments and do a number of resale properties all at the same time, different prices, different information, different lenders. It just makes it easier for us as well as our applicants. So, other lessons learned, things that we continue to focus on improving our communication. Over communication is the key in a normal world. In a world in which we've turned our person-to-person communication into a Zoom meeting, it's really imperative that we over-communicate and we repeat the details of our properties numerous times to our buyers so that they know what they're signing, they know what they're getting into, they know what they're purchasing. We don't and can't rely upon the website to do all of our work. It's replaced some meetings and it's replaced communication systems, but we have to follow up. Yes, it's possible for us to get from point A to closing without ever meeting the person in person, but we need to take more time over the phone, over electronic means, to make sure we know who the buyer is and they know who Habitat is. Language barriers are still something that we focused on, mainly because in person it became easier for us to read the nonverbal cues if somebody was understanding or not. The translation services make it much easier, but now instead of relying upon nonverbals, we ask the question. We ask our applicants to paraphrase back to us to make sure they understand. The tag here of Know Your Audience is primarily because we included the repair application on our website and then realized that the majority of our repair applicants are senior citizens who do not access the website. So we end up on the phone with them filling out the application, which is just a good workaround process. Would we have done things differently if we had known that? Probably not, but we would have built in, maybe a phone call with the individual to introduce them to the application. So there are things that there are things that we had to overcome, and there are things that we have to focus on. But overall, I'm impressed at how a negative situation became the answer to what we needed anyway. So
that, all that being said, and there's a lot of things we've learned, and it's been quite successful, which is important to note. It's worked, which kind of has surprised us all in some ways. But it's important to know that there are still questions that we have that are outstanding, that we don't know how things are going to shake out or what has happened. One of which, for example, is what are the long-term impacts of this change? Like, what are we going to see with the communities we're serving or whatnot? What do you think, Maya?
I got lost in the chat room there. Sorry, Ryan. But yeah, the long-term impacts, one of the things I worry about is, are we serving or are we able to reach everybody in the community, the underserved people, the people who can't access computers? One of the things we're doing is we're going to put a lot of our information on iPads that we can loan out to people who don't have access at all. But yet I still ask myself, who are we missing? And is the turn to technology going to does it exclude people? So it's a question we ask. I think also we wonder if we're going to ever revert to the old way we did things. Are we done with paper applications? Really? It just seems so odd. Anyway, we watch for that as well. I don't think we will, but there's always that possibility.
And of course, there's always the question of, will we be able to actually overcome, there is that technical barrier, right?
That's right.
And we think what we're going to do is going to work. But we don't know for sure. I mean, the reality is, as we know, not everybody has access to high-speed broadband internet. And particularly as we continue to do this work and continue to expand not only within King County, but also into some of the more rural parts of the state, it's important to note that internet access is not something we can take for granted. So we got to make sure that we're approaching that in a smart and intelligent way, and kind of keeping our eye on that to make sure that that our process, one, is working, and two, is being successful. So at this point, I want to make sure, I know we've answered a few questions as we've gone along, but I wanted to ask if you all have any questions of us that you haven't had a chance to ask yet.
So no questions for us. Anybody able to tell us what kind of responses or issues were posed by your organization because of COVID, and any answers that you may have provided?
And Jenny, I noticed in the chat that Jenny mentions that she was an AmeriCorps Family Services Coordinator for the Seattle South King County Habitat Affiliate back in 2010, 2011. So we're really glad that you were able to see what we've done and some of the changes we've had so far as well. So thank you.
Yeah, things have changed a lot since that time, Jenny. Hopefully it's gotten easier, busier and easier, but the AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps members are vital to what we do. So thank you for your service. I guess we don't have any takers or questions, Brian.
I have one question. This is Mallory with HDC.
Yeah.
Entered this in the chat, but since you all have expanded your geographic range, you're working in Kittitas County now. I guess, how does that look different than the work that you do in King in your other areas? I mean, land costs and other things like that come to mind for me, but yeah, what are the priorities in those areas and how do they differ from King County?
Right.
So at least from my perspective, I think we're going to have two different perspectives on this. And that's one of the great things about having two different people. From my perspective, part of that question we can't entirely answer yet. It's very early on, right? I mean, this started in July is when we ended up adding Kittitas into our service area. So we're still in the process of working all this out. But at the same time, we also know that it's important that Kittitas have its own feel to it, right? It needs to be its own kind of entity, because the reality is Habitat can't come in and build willy-nilly whatever the hell we want and not have it meet, with what the rest of the community is and what the rest of the community wants. We need to make sure that we're kind of working within that. So we're actually partnering, we're actually actively partnering right now with the city of Ellensburg, I believe, to be able to kind of put some projects together and make some proposals. Right now, really, our focus is just getting shovels in the ground out there and making sure that we get something started, because we want to make sure that we get things kicked off. We're lucky in that we do have a good history with some of the folks already out there. So we're just trying to capitalize on that and making sure that we're able to do that. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question or if I've successfully filibustered enough for you to forget what the question was.
That was helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Maya.
Oh, I was going to add into that as far as a home ownership or repair, the programs will be they'll be the programs that we currently run in King County. So the selection process will mirror what we're doing. Prices are going to be different. The price that the buyers pay is going to be different because the cost should be different. That's kind of what I'm extrapolating from everything. We're getting closer to actually doing our first development. I'm closer, I mean 6 months to 9 to a year. And having our first development is going to help us define things. But I see that Kittitas buyers will use our buyhabitat.org website, just use different income numbers to qualify. So as much as possible, we want it to duplicate what we're currently doing instead of designing a new program.
Absolutely. So I see Laura has a question. Laura, did you want to read yours out loud or do you want me to read it? I'm not sure.
Oh, I can read it. From a housing organizing standpoint around someone that I'm very passionate about missing middle housing. And regionally, there's different amounts of comfort level with legislators and elective and policymakers around like what their communities need. And so that's kind of the background of my question. So I guess I'm asking if you're getting any pushback from your members or your donors around moving to missing middle housing types. Are you going to be pushing for more land to build this housing type during regional conversations like the comprehensive plan updates in different communities? And is there any education that you plan to do, like kind of anticipating that there might be pushback and helping people understand that good neighbors and good homes come in all shapes and sizes?
Yeah.
So all great questions. To generally try and answer some of that, at least that's partly why I came on board, to be perfectly honest, is to try and be able to start shepherding some of those relationships. I've been with Habitat for about a year now. And I actually, when I started, I was working on the state side of, for the state affiliate. So I'm now working specifically for the Seattle affiliate itself, trying to help develop those relationships with lawmakers and policymakers. Because we understand, just as you said, Laura, that there is this need and the need isn't being met. We're lucky in that the Habitat brand in and of itself is really quite strong, particularly with lawmakers and policymakers. Like everyone likes Habitat. I always like to joke that if you hate Habitat, you also probably hate puppies and kittens and apple pie. But it's important for us that we make sure that we start using our brand in a way that helps further our mission, and our vision, that vision being, again, to make sure that everybody has a safe, quality, and affordable home. And we know not only will that fit within, not only is that our kind of comfort zone area, right, in this reporting, in this home ownership space, but it's also rentals. It's also supportive housing. We're actually in the process, we relatively recently, we're about a year in, launched our first ever national level advocacy campaign, which to think that Habitat's been in existence this long and it's only now doing its first ever national level advocacy campaign. It's called The Cost of Home. So we're really excited to be doing that work. And one of the things that gives us the opportunity to do is get more involved across the board on a lot of different things. So partly the answer is yes, we're looking to try and use the brand that we have and the leverage that we have with politicians and lawmakers and policymakers across the board to really try and bring them on board to go, look, you love Habitat. The way that we can survive is by doing these missing middle building projects, right? And that opens the door in a way that sometimes other organizations have a harder time getting into. Because again, who hates Habitat, right? At least we're pretty lucky. And then I think we're also involved in a lot of those other conversations as well, as far as regional comprehensive plan updates, or at least I should say we're trying to get involved. I'm lucky in that we have great partners at HDC. You, Laura, being one, obviously, Mallory as well, and so many others that we work with closely, both to help bring awareness to some of these things and to help us try and make sure that we're taking advantage of these opportunities where we can. So hopefully that helps answer the question. Any other questions real quick? I figure we have time for one, maybe two more questions if anybody wanted to ask. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Oh, shoot.
So from the communication side of things, how is Habitat kind of working on its communication strategy? Because so much of it is that Habitat for Humanity, the personal connection of building and providing homes and stuff. So how are you guys pivoting and, using maybe, new communication strategies in that regard?
Good question. I'm not sure I have the answer to that though.
No worries.
Well, I do the advocacy side of things. I'm not as tied in right now, at least not yet, with the communication side of things. That being said, we are, even on the communication side of things, we are in the process of shifting to more online options, right? Relatively recently, I shouldn't even say relatively recently, it's actually been almost 5 months, I think, 4 months, something like that. We transitioned our annual fundraiser that we do every year, is usually a big event, Beyond the Build, I believe it's called, right? Am I wrong?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you're right.
I was really
Beyond
hoping
the
to
Build.
get that right. And we actually transitioned that to online only. And we did this whole event, and it was actually incredibly successful, right? We're using social media, and we're trying to engage on that a little more as well. And I would also say that we're slowly reaching out to more, or to try and expand our communication effort where we can. But also a lot of that is in conjunction, again, with some of our partners. We're happy to always work with folks. Habitat going alone is a fairly rare thing, but Habitat working in conjunction with others is something that we really very much try to embrace and amplify. So that's always stuff, things that we want to be able to help elevate.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate what you guys put about not relying solely on a website, because now we plug into so many different channels and make sure, Yeah.
You're right. When you ask about communications, I'm thinking that I have a communications plan for how we need to reach our current homeowners and in both programs. And it's something that's been a work in progress for 2 to 3 years. And again, like COVID made so many things happen, I find that piece becomes critical. How do we do more communication? How can we clarify newsletters, social media, phone calls? There's a real need and addressing that need has become apparent. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you.
And with that in mind, I should note a couple things that we do, or a couple things we do want to plug real quick. Excuse me. First off, keep pushing the arrow button. First off is we actually relatively recently, as in about a month ago, launched our candidate questionnaire. So we were actually able to put together this program, put together a list of questions on candidates and on issues or on housing issues, particularly affordable housing issues, and present that to the governor, the candidates running for governor, the candidates running for lieutenant governor, federal candidates, state legislative candidates, and present them with a bunch of questions, got them to answer them, surprisingly enough, and actually put them all online for everybody to read. You can check that out at habitatskc.org/candidate-questionnaire. I think
I did
Maya
post that to the chat. So FYI, I posted that link.
Absolutely. I would highly encourage anyone and everyone to check it out. Like I said, we actually got answers from a lot of people, which is kind of cool.
It's great.
Including both candidates running for governor, obviously, the folks running for lieutenant governor, both candidates for Congressional District 1, as well as a lot of the folks running in state Senate and state House races in this coming up election. So as everybody's starting to get their ballots, I believe in King County, ballots are supposed to have been mailed today. So that's one thing I wanted to go ahead and plug. I also should, one other thing I wanted to plug is something that we've mentioned quite a few times already, but is the fantastic buyhabitat.org website. Check it out, take a look at it, let us know what you think. You can reach us either at Maya at the email there, me at the email there. You know, we're certainly available. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or, you know, whatnot. We'd love to hear back from you. Feedback is something we both very much appreciate.
I did post the buyhabitat.org in the chat room and just would repeat what Ryan said. If you have any comments or input on the website, please send me an email. I'd love to know what you think.
Awesome. And with that, I think, unless there's any last questions, fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. And
Thanks,
we'll
gang.
get back 6 minutes.
All right.